All right, hello guys, this is Ram,
And this is Betty.
and welcome back to Total Tactics Football. Sheffield scored 3 today versus Chelsea. It was 3-0 when all things were said and done, and Lampard mentioned that he learned a lot again. How do you
Yeah.
think that went for Chelsea?
Did he learn though? It seems to be a topic that we keep coming back to Chelsea's defensive problems. And that is an issue. I do think Lampard is capable of learning, but he needs to learn fast. He needs to learn quickly because it's getting really, really tight in the top four race now. And if one more mistake could mean that they're potentially out. So at this moment, Man United look on hot form. This is not good for Chelsea.
Absolutely. I think in terms of form, Man United look like the best teams with Leicester, Chelsea, and Man United vying for a top four spot. It might be the fact that Chelsea require Man United to beat Leicester and for them to stay in from that point of view. But I think what's key today, you mentioned Chelsea's defense was poor, but what also looked poor today was Chelsea's offensive tactics. I think they didn't provide much at all, if not for just the sort of first 15 minutes where they seemed quite comfortable on the ball versus Sheffield, but it just went from bad to worse.
And I agree. I mean, it feels like they were missing a sort of a creative outlet in number 10. Normally, whose Mount would play that role, but I feel like he was sort of nullified today. That could be due to Sheffield's incredible setup. We're going to give them credit, and we're going to talk about them just after this. But I do feel like Chelsea sort of struggled with being able to create chances. They couldn't find their way through, and I think that's something they also need to look at because sometimes you will come up against those teams, and the league has a lot of different kind of teams and different kind of setups, and it's 38 games, and if you want to be playing in the top four, or in the future winning leagues or competing for it, you need to be able to beat these teams with different setups.
Absolutely. So, when we look at Sheffield's defensive tactics, what's interesting for me is that they put a lot of their players, around the kind of edge of the box, and that forces many teams to play out to the wing because Sheffield like to kind of crowd the center defensively, and that allowed for a few chances for Reece James, for example, to have crosses to the back post, but nothing really came out of it. And I think that's because, on one hand, Sheffield is very much prepared for defending the back post. We had Pulisic having a header that was a chance gone awry. But other than that, they were mostly shut out. And what's best about this is Chelsea really struggled to play a crossing game because when they play Azpilicueta as a left back, he's not able to cross on his left foot. He's very poor on it. And effectively, all Sheffield is looking at is there's going to be attacks coming from the right. It's going to come from Reece James and no one else in reality if we're able to shut the center down well. And as long as we put enough men to block, let's say, a great run from Pulisic, there's enough bodies there to stop a winger from being able to cut inside and kind of strip the Sheffield defense away.
It's just the way the Sheffield was set up today. Having Stevens and Osborne and O'Connell and Goldrick there, Goldrick sitting between your James and Zuma and Christensen, and then you have Stevens going a bit forward and Osborne constantly making the run. It pegged Chelsea back, and it made that Reece James had to sit a little deeper. It was a bit difficult for them to progress forward. It's this lineup that was harder to break, and I feel like and that was perfect. I think it was a plan. They decided that this is Wilder decided this is how they were going to go, and they played with this, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's sad for Chelsea really because I think Lampard attempted many things this game. He did see that Azpilicueta wasn't working out. He put Alonso on at halftime, and he also took Christensen out. I think Christensen might have potentially been slightly injured, which is why Rudiger came on. But that's another issue when put on subs early and you don't have that kind of momentum. It doesn't add any more additional sting to the game. And I think Sheffield were very much prepared for that Chelsea side. And the worst part was, before halftime, of course, Sheffield were up 2-0. The key part of that is when you're putting on an offensive sub, like for example Alonso, it's so much harder to find that additional goal when you're already down. And it seems like
Exactly.
the other team has the better of you. So should we look
And
at the kind of individual goals from Sheffield and see what was so interesting about them?
we should. Just before that, I'd like to mention that Jorginho, who normally we've been asking for him to be put into this team, I feel Wilder saw that how important Jorginho is to Chelsea's play from the back. Um, And today we could see in the first half, Jorginho was sort of nowhere to be seen at moments. The defensive setup that meant that their offensive setup by Sheffield meant that Jorginho was a bit out of position at times, and he couldn't get the ball where he would normally like to be able to turn, and would use his passing range to create options. And that's also, I think, a major key where Chelsea lost today for me.
That's interesting. So I think Mount as well had a slightly poor positional game. We can talk about, what his influences was on the first goal, but I just didn't see the same sort of creativity of Mount. I think he was, in a sense, also playing somewhat in the same positions as Pulisic today. They weren't, kind of working the runs around each other, and they weren't able to use Tammy Abraham effectively as a target man, even though he had a few good layoffs to Pulisic. I thought Mount was had a poor game today in terms of his offensive presence and positioning.
I personally am not sure about how great you can how good it is for him to play in that 4-3-3 setup on the left hand side if you are playing with the likes of Barkley and Jorginho. He needs a bit more security there, which the 4-3-3 doesn't necessarily allow him. And like you said, if the partnership wasn't him, I feel like in a number 10 role he would be a bit more free and to be able to move from the right to the left. In this side, when he's on the left hand side, as center midfielder playing a bit forward, it limits his space to be able to move, and that's what Mount is good at. He's able to grab the ball, run in different directions, sort of play with people, link up. And being on this left hand side, it feels like 2 games now. I feel maybe it's not working out so well, and maybe Lampard needs to change the setup a little bit.
So if we go to the first goal, I mean, a bit unfortunately, it comes through 2 deflections, but before the play happens, there's a slight moment in time where Chelsea are able to kind of defend the ball out, and Mount attempts to start a counter attack. Many people pointed that out as criticism from Mount. He should have cleared the ball, but I would point out that Mount is essential to their counter attacks. He's always the one at the top of the box trying to start a counter attack, and there's no one else on that team who's able to carry that ball forwards other than Mount. So, which is why he attempts that, and I think he has to go for that, in my opinion.
Oh no, I agree with you. He has to go for it, but that's where the criticism comes. Like, if when it doesn't come off, he came up against Sanderberger. Again, these are split seconds, so you're not really sure who you're coming up against. He ran. I think he misjudged how powerful and like how pacey Sanderberger is in that short distance, and he lost the ball there. Which if there's criticism to it, fair enough, but it would be a bit harsh to mention that he's at the fault for the game, because Sheffield still had a lot to do. Chelsea had a lot of bodies at the back which could have done better, but it was one of those where I personally think Mount should have cleared. But having listened to your opinion as well, and it does make sense, Chelsea, Mount is crucial to their counter, but for me he misjudged his battle with Sanderberger, and that eventually led to the goal.
That's the thing. I mean, it comes from 2 deflections. I think that was unlucky for Chelsea, but
definitely
what wasn't unlucky was their second goal. That was, the marks of really poor schoolboy defending.
It's hard to see this, because we've talked about this from like any team. You have a runner, you follow your runner. We will talk about it. Like, I mean, I do feel Stevens and McBurney, they managed to create like some sort of space, but I feel like over there, people were criticizing Reece James for this. I was in the beginning as well, but after watching it again, listening to you, I feel Willian is more to blame for this goal than anyone else.
Yeah, so I would actually liken it to how you set up your defense, right? So when you, for example, watch like an NBA game, there is such a thing as a screen. Usually you are marking one specific defender, and then your other teammate is man marking someone else. And so Willian is meant to be marking Stevens in this situation, and Reece James, who is behind him, should be marking Osborne. And he should tell Willian, because he's behind him, that Willian needs to follow his man, whereas Reece James is about to mark Osborne. What's interesting for me is that there isn't that sort of communication, and Williams completely forgoes the run. Stevens is able to run through and make a cross. It looks like both of them are at fault, but I think fundamentally this has to be something in the training grounds where you already understand how you're going to deal with this. In the NBA, some teams will actually alternate from the screen. They will change the kind of defender, and you will swap for a momentary second as a result of the screen. In this sense, it's quite similar here. Either you understand from your training that Willian is meant to alternate and swap to Osborne, or you just have Reece James shouting behind him, you have to mark Stevens and you have to follow his run. In this case, we see that Willian is stood in no man's land, and Reece James follows Osborne, and Stevens is free. That's poor defending, and I think fundamentally it comes down to how you should manage your defensive assignments.
Well, that's true. I would like to just add a little bit of a little attacking brilliance in Sheffield's play there as well, because O'Connell from the centre back position, as you know, Sheffield loves to overlap their centre back. He makes a run. I feel like for a second it phased Willian and he got confused. Regardless, he should still be following Stevens,
Right.
no matter what. It's a it's a schoolboy error. You got to follow your man.
Absolutely, and I mean the third goal, it's a bit of a non-story. I think just a simple mistake from Rudiger. But that speaks to the larger story for me here. Fantastic news all season about their transfers. They're bringing Ziyech, they're bringing Werner. Another name that's been mentioned time and time again, and he seems to be about to hand in his transfer request. It's Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz seems to be the final cog in the Chelsea machine for this transfer window. But I've been championing for a centre back, and I think the fact that Lampard has gone through different rotations where he's put Rudiger out of the lineup, he's started Zuma, he started Christensen at different points in the season. It shows that they need someone who's a world-class centre-back to shore up the back, because they simply don't have enough figures, and a centre-back and a left-back is absolutely crucial for Chelsea to vie for any sort of success in the next season for me.
I agree with you. The centre-back is definitely an issue. But the question remains, when you have a talent like Kai Havertz available, and you know that this is it, this is the moment you can get him, or you won't get him later, because there are other teams out there, people who will outbid you, people where he can play. I feel like Chelsea know this. Chelsea need to make that investment. For me, Kai Havertz is going to be phenomenal. He can play as a center forward, as a number 10, right inside forward. Allows you a lot of flexibility. With the likes of the talents that they're bringing in with Werner and Ziyech, that's a phenomenal team they'll be making. What's crazy is, though, they are issues, and like you said, Zuma, Christensen, Rudiger, no one seems to be a solid starter for the team. There's no one center back you could say definitively like, this is the man, you can't take him out. They need to address this, but how can you let an option like Havertz go? And it's maybe, I think it's a gamble worth taking. I think if it means you can invest in Havertz now and be set for attack for the next 4 or 5 years, and you go for a world-class center back next year. And I do personally, just before to add that, I do feel there are some good options out there that they can look at, maybe to bring in to solidify. They've been looking at Aki, who they could get it at a cheaper price if Bournemouth gets relegated. They might not have to spend a lot of money if they are. So they might try to use an cheaper option in this transfer window to supplement the Havertz sale.
Yeah, I do agree with you. So they had a buyback clause right on Aki, and I think Lampard chose to forego it because, in a sense, Aki is quite similar to Rudiger and Christensen. I think he'd be solid, but they also have Tomori, in the ranks as well. You don't need more centre backs. You need someone who's world class, and I think Aki just isn't there yet. What they really do need is someone like Koulibaly, and if it's not possible to get Koulibaly, then yes, I agree. Kai Havertz is an option. But for me, the way I see it is this Chelsea team needs balance. It's their defensive woes are slightly underpinned by the fact that Kante is out and Kovacic is out. He's one of their main ball carriers, and he's also a bit more positionally solid than Mount at times, and better, as an out-and-out centre mid as opposed to a 10. And that's the key thing for me. I think you need balance, and for this Chelsea team on paper to be solid from top to bottom, I think you need to go with someone like Koulibaly.
Koulibaly. I mean, they're gonna have to face competition with Man City. They seem to be very interested in Koulibaly, and I feel like that's it's a signing that would take them back to where they were. But yeah, there aren't too many center backs out there, and center backs seem to be a rare commodity, and they're very expensive as well. So it is a choice where if you can't get the likes of Koulibaly, you might want to just wait until the better options available. Maybe do with. You're right. They do have a lot of center backs. They will need to offload at least one if they're going to bring another one in. For me, I would go, if you don't find, I don't see a world-class center back necessarily available for them at this moment. I think go for Havertz. Try to find a smart option in the transfer window I'm sure they must have a scouts out there right now looking for a center back pairing. There's Gabriel for Lille. Um, there's a lot of players out there that they could work with. They could even try to go for Leipzig's Upamecano if they can find him at a good price. He might be a
Right.
bit expensive as well, but he could be one of those young talents who could like come and provide some sort of solidity. But if not, they're looking for some leadership. They might have to wait for another transfer window.